Up. There. Okay. So as this goes on, guys, if you guys have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to chime in, and we'll try to avoid all the controversy. Dust Force is one of my favorite games of all time.
Thanks. All right, we're going to start this off by asking Tim to tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am Tim Keenan. I made a game called A Virus Named Tom, and now I'm making a game called Duskers about piloting drones into derelict spaceships and trying to survive and find out what went wrong. It's kind of like a survival horror, roguelike, real-time strategy type game. I like how I immediately go into that spiel. It's like it's ingrained into my head, my little PR, right? Before that, I worked at DreamWorks Animation for about a decade. Everything from Shrek 2 to How to Train Your Dragon and Megamind, just about, doing visual effects. So that included things like fire and simulating plants moving in Madagascar and stuff like that. And then I also did pipeline stuff, which is like, how are we going to render like 1 million plants and cull them out of this, like allow lighters to cull certain things out and stuff like that. And before that, I worked in AAA at a place called Rainbow Studios, where we made games like ATV Off-Road Fury 2 and Splashdown, a lot of extreme sports games. And my wife worked with me. My wife Holly worked with me on A Virus Named Tom, and now she's working a little bit less on Duskers just because we have a 3-year-old daughter named Haley. I'm from Boston originally, as I wear my Bruins Stanley Cup t-shirt. But now I live in San Francisco and work at home and squat in the Double Fine space.
Nice.
That's the very peripheral my life.
Cool. That's a pretty good
life.
Pretty good. So question number 2. What do you think is your greatest weakness?
My greatest weakness in development, probably, in like a work environment, would probably be that if I'm working on something that doesn't interest me, I can't work on it.
Yeah.
Which is a huge problem when you're working in, like, when you're working for yourself, that's a problem too. But when you're working for somebody else, that's a big problem because they might assign you a task that's just kind of sucks.
So how did you, like, work at all these big studios then if you had that problem? Were you always assigned interesting things, or?
I think what happened is that, so I would be, normally I would be assigned interesting things because those are what I was excited about. Mm-hmm. So I'd, talk about them and then I'd work on them and then I'd get more work like that, right? Yeah. So, like large systems that were, complicated, how are we going to tackle this big procedural system? That was that sounds like such an interesting problem. Yeah. And so I'd attack those things. But then in between productions, or let's say we were done with, developing the look of fire for How to Train Your Dragon, mm-hmm. right, which was really fun, making these systems and stuff like that. Then all of a sudden you start getting into shot work, right, like these one-off shots. And you might get a really interesting one-off shot, or you might get a very boring one-off shot. Yeah. And so one time I got assigned one of those when I had been when I was hoping to do other stuff. And then I just kind of had a lot of trouble concentrating, because it's the internet is there. And there's always ways to distract yourself. And so I'd kind of do a crappy job of it. Mm-hmm. And then they'd be like, well, this isn't really good. And they'd give me a lot of feedback. Yeah. And then I'd have to go back and do it. And then I'd do a half-assed job of that. And then there was this spiral that just kind of went down where it just got worse and worse.
Yeah. Sounds like me with UI stuff, but I just do one pass and say that's good enough.
Right.
Regardless of input. Right.
So that led to problems because, it's very bratty, right? It's very and it wasn't even I didn't even feel bratty. It's just that I would find myself searching the internet for a half an hour and I'd be like, what am I doing? And then I realized it was because I wasn't interested in my work. Mm-hmm. So that, I would say that. And then I think on a personal side, one of my weaknesses is that I care too much about what people think. I think that I find myself writing these long apologetic emails if I might have done something or said something that might have upset somebody or anything, because I'm kind of a jackass. I kind of just act the way I want to act, and I joke around a lot. And not everyone gets that at first.
Yeah.
Usually, actually, most of my friends, and I'm probably a little bit better about this now that I'm older, but I remember in college, most of my friends were like, when I met you, I thought you were a complete asshole. And then they were like, and then I realized you were just messing with me.
That
And maybe
you were
it's
just not so.
then it was like they liked the fact that I was an asshole. I don't know, but yeah. So that was a problem that I kind of have. So then because of that, because I'm aware of that, I get hyper apologetic, and so I think sometimes I make a bigger deal of things and I worry too much that like maybe someone got bothered by something I said, or maybe I'm always trying to
Well, it's generally
make everybody
like a
happy.
good thing.
It's a good thing.
Like that's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing.
Like if you cared too much about what people think, that it like impacted your decisions, like that would be
right.
like your game decisions.
Right.
Like sure, your like personal decisions, but like if you care that people really want to have
Right.
fast-paced combat in your game, so then you struggle to put that in and it doesn't fit.
Or
So-
it'd be really difficult if you cared too much what people thought, because there's a lot of hate on the internet, and then they typed in like that your game sucks or whatever, and then you got depressed about that or whatever.
Yeah, I guess you gotta try and brush
Build
that.
up thick skin to that.
Yeah.
Do you mainly work at the art side, or did you work more in the technical development part like Pixar's RenderMan? So I was at this beautiful confluence of both. I would do shot work, which is almost not purely art, but because we'd use, you'd write some code or an expression or whatever to control particles or something like that. But the end result was always an artistic goal. So when I was doing shot work, I was very much an animator or an effects artist, if you will. However, on the flip side, in pre-production, we'd be working on things like I was saying, like Madagascar had a ton of foliage. So we had to make sure that all of that worked. And so I would be working on basically a tool to allow lighters to define different regions and break the scene up so that they could light it separately and not have to have all the depth maps or the shadows and everything all in one. So that was more technical. And then I went even more technical when we rewrote the entire pipeline for DreamWorks. And the pipeline was basically, and these departments might not make sense to people, but so let's say there's a department called layout, and what they do is they take the models. Okay, so there's a department called modeling, and they'll make the models, and then layout will place the models, and then someone will texture the models, and then someone will animate the models, and then an effects will light it on fire, and lighting will light it. So there's all these departments, and we would write a pipeline that allowed people to pass their data off nicely so that you weren't stepping on each other's feet. So that was very technical. So I kind of
source control in a way, and like flagging of events and stuff like that.
Kind of, yeah. It's more like layout wanted to view the data one way.
Okay.
They wanted to be like, I care that these are all small bushes, and I'm going to paste them all over the scene.
Yeah.
Lighting said, I don't give a crap about that. I care that these are the ones in the foreground, these are the ones in the background, these are the ones that are down the beach in this shot. Because lighting thinks as a shot, and layout thinks like a set.
Right.
So it's like they think of the data differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't want it the way that layout thinks of their data to affect how lighting has to work with the data.
Yeah.
So we tried to make these systems by which, and then of course things never are perfect. Like lighting might have to say, hey, layout, you need to move this stuff, and so it's got to go backwards. So it's not like you can just publish the data forwards.
Yeah.
It's got to be one. The goal was to have this like ubiquitous view of the world, but then everyone else could view and edit the data in their own way,
Mm-hmm.
which is really complicated because there's so many edge cases.
Yeah.
When like an entire 90-minute movie or whatever, and multiple of them going on. So yeah, so stuff like that. Is Jillian a shapeshifter? Maybe. I mean, the sane answer would be no, but I never really thought about it, and it would explain some things.
So what did you like least about your job? I guess the working on shit you didn't enjoy doing. Was there something else that you didn't enjoy?
I guess pretty much the reason that I left and became an independent developer is that like I just wanted more control.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like picture to picture and day to day, like I was working on a story that I might have thought should go another way, I was a small piece of a really big picture, and that was really cool. But then after a while, it got tedious. And I think the reason why is right now I'm working on my own project, and I'm wearing all these hats, and I have to worry about all of these things. So I didn't even have time to be bored. But even if you have lots of shot work, if it's the same kind of stuff, or even if it's different stuff, but you're not excited about it. So I think that at the end of the day, I was too small of a piece of the picture. And so I wanted greater creative control. And so that was the one thing that I probably would say that I didn't like about my job. Because my job was actually really good, and I really enjoyed it, and that's why I was there for a decade. But yeah, after a while, I think it just wore on me that I couldn't... Like, when people loved How to Train Your Dragon, right? Like, I felt pride in that. But I was like, what did you think of the fire? Like, when the trebuchet exploded, what do you think of that? You know, and people would be like, oh yeah, that was cool, you know, but that's not what they're thinking of, you know? It's just this holistic thing in the story and everything about it, and I'm a part of that, but I wanted to be more like, oh yeah, you know what, like all this stuff, like that was like my wife's idea, or my idea, or my friend's idea, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I can see that, like...
Oh, is it? Oh, hold on. Sorry, my stream is titled Interviewing Jillian Ogle, which I replaced, but that's why they're saying that. Me. I don't know if this will take. Can you change it in the middle of a stream?
I don't know. Maybe.
All right, so I just changed it. So now it doesn't say Interviewing Jillian Ogle.
So, what about like being an indie dev? Is there something about that you like don't enjoy doing, or like for me, it's just like not having someone to tell me what to do. I actually don't like that. Like, it's really nice having this task of things and someone delegating something to you and being like, oh yeah, I just need to go quickly do that. And it's like a blessing and a curse, because it's like good to have your own freedom, but at the same time, it's like I just get like so overwhelmed with all the things that I have to do, and I'm just like, which should I tackle first? And then I put the whole thing off, and then I don't get anything done, and then I don't eat food. So it's
right. Yeah, no, I would say that I'm probably the same way. Like, I would probably phrase it as, yeah, having to worry about everything, right? Because, like, normally, I mean, you might be in a slightly better situation for this, but probably not. Like, normally, in an ideal world, it would be like, oh, I am designing the game maybe, and I'm programming part of it, and then I have another developer and an artist and a music guy, and we're all in love with this idea that we've got this cohesion around, and we're all cranking.
Yeah.
That would be the ideal world. But in reality, for me, I'm kind of like the driving force behind the game, and I have contractors that I bring on, and even people that are working, but since I'm the vision behind it, like I have to, it's like spinning plates, right? Like I'm spinning this plate, and I'm like, oh, things are going good, and then all of a sudden there's a wobbling one over here. It's like, oh, the art in the game hasn't been addressed for a while. It's like, oh, let me get to that, and like, oh, there's no real music right now. Oh, let me like start spinning that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this constant feel, and sometimes if the contractors aren't proactive about it, like, you know, weeks will go by and then I'll be like, oh, they haven't done anything. And then other times, weeks will go by and I'll get emails from them and they'll be like, hey, have you listened to like this music, or have you looked at this stuff I've sent you? And I'm like, oh no, because I was distracted by this other thing.
Yeah.
And like when I was at DreamWorks or whatever, someone was doing that.
Yeah.
Right. So you're right. Like I was like, hey, make the fire right here look really pretty. We'll take care of the rest.
Yeah.
So I do I love wearing all the hats and doing all that stuff, but it's also just exhausting, like having to be the guy that reminds everyone to do things.
Yeah, personally, I would really like to have a project manager, like someone who was just like, hey, you know, do all this and like take care of paperwork,
right?
All that stuff, just so I could be like, oh, I'm just gonna make a video game today, you know, instead of like, oh, I need to tell, you know, it's just too much shit that you gotta worry about.
Holly and I talked about that. We talked about like bringing on a project manager, and actually we did at times. It was always someone, because I couldn't afford like a for real project manager, like my friends that do that stuff for like Telltale or whatever. I couldn't afford to pay them, but I would bring on someone that was like, you know, a junior in it. But the problem is that like project management, you have to be so kind of intimate with the understanding of the game and everything that needs to be done. I can't be like, hey, figure out what we got to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're gonna I was basically telling them like what all the tasks were, and then they'd like kind of make some kind of schedule and then tell everybody else, but I was so involved in the process.
And you'd probably have to tell them, no, this is going to take longer. And
Right.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, you know what? I've decided that we need to focus on like the first 20 minutes of the game because people are super confused, so we got to make that a priority right now. And it's like, and then they feel like they have no authority at all over anything.
Yeah.
So it helped a little bit, but I found that I was just doing it anyway. So I think the solution for me was just to find incredibly self-directed people and then just deal with it.
So there's a couple of good questions in chat. Did you ever put any Easter eggs in any of your movies?
By accident, generally. Like there weren't things
I
like,
accidentally drew a penis.
yes. See, that's what everyone thinks. They're like, oh, did you put like a penis in the clouds or whatever, right? And that's really difficult to do because art directors are like ninjas, and they're usually the ones that are like, oh, like this is off by a pixel, and this is, that's what their job is.
Yeah.
So sneaking something like that by them would be very difficult. What has happened is we've iterated on a scene, and then for some reason in the final cut they had an old version of the data, and so it's like a previous revision. So one time, I think in Shrek 2, there was like a collision object that I had underneath the surface of the blankets of the bed, and it was just used there. If you can imagine, the cloth will settle down on a surface and it won't be agitated anymore. And so I used a collision object to make it so that it would rest nicely, and then I removed it so that the depression would sink in correctly, because it's basically like a bunch of points and spring masses and stuff like that. And in one shot, I didn't remove the collision object, so there's this big bulge, like down, not exactly where his penis was, but like down near his feet and stuff like that, and it just looked wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
And
And
then
then
notice that.
I was watching, and I swear to God, like I was watching the DVD before I noticed that like that shot had old data, and there was just this big bubble like underneath where his feet were, and nobody probably would have ever noticed that. But it's like, it was just one of those moments where I'm like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'd be like if somebody got a previous version of your game and then
Yeah.
was playing it online, and you're just like, no, we fixed that. you
Yeah,
know?
that happens all the time with our stuff. Like, because I don't push the builds and like check them. So one of the other guys does that. So there's just like a particle missing on like one of the, like, when you destroy green blocks in our game, like there's meant to be all this like acid particles come out, and they're just not there, and it looks really bad. I'm just like, fuck. But it's so much effort to push builds, so I just
Right.
But I fixed them. I'll push a new one soon.
Right.
But it's been like that for 2 years.
So I was driving. I know that like Brandon, who was QAing a virus named Tom, there's this bug that I think it's that like if you play a level again and you get a bronze medal in it, it'll show, because there's like 54 levels in the single player campaign, it'll show 54 gold and then 1 bronze, because you got the bronze in it or something like that, and then as soon as you get the gold, it'll like reset or whatever. But that was kind of drove him crazy, but it wasn't like a critical bug.
Yeah.
No one was reporting it.
Yeah.
And pushing a build is like so scary when you've got like all these people with the game, and you like go to fix this tiny little like bronze medal bug, and then all of a sudden like some people like can't play the game.
Yeah.
You know, so like I didn't push it out, and I hate it when there's like things that you're like, there's this little code change,
Yeah.
and then I'll do it, but like
change
you're just
it to a zero.
too afraid to push it out.
Yeah.
Um,
It also, it's getting harder with all the different platforms people expect your game to be on now.
Yeah.
Like on Steam, it's way easier because they have tools to like help you push out the build to everyone, and everyone gets updated automatically and stuff. But if you have a DRM free version, which is what not everyone, but there's a sizable chunk of people that want DRM free, but it means that your game doesn't update. And then, now we have to do an automatic updater for the DRM free version, but it's like, but Steam offers that, and it's like, you just gotta, to make everyone happy, you gotta add all this stuff, or just not update.
Right, so with Duskers right now,
Yeah.
I decided at least, and I put this on the pre-order site, that when we do the early access stuff, like before we launch, it's just going to be Windows, Steam.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, I'm iterating on design, so I don't want to, because I did, it's like, oh, you're in Unity, just hit the button, and I hit the button, and like, understandably, there's just like there's an artifact right now on a texture that's going across the screen in the Mac build, and I'm like, my time eventually will be spent fixing that stuff, but I don't want to fix all these bugs and then all of a sudden like I get rid of that feature and I did all this work.
Yeah.
So, and I get a little bit of, sometimes I get flack, of course, from like Mac unit users or Linux users, and they're just like, why can't that be part of it? And it's just like, yeah. And I'm just like, and I'm sorry, but it's just like when I'm iterating on the game, I'm just going to do like kind of like the lowest common denominator, if you will, and iterate on that and make sure that that's solid and good, and then do all the focus on the porting. Maybe different people do it different ways. That's just kind of how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So there's another question that said, what's the strongest feature you learned from animated movie industry that you took along into making games?
Honestly, that would be, I'm almost positive that would be, well, there's all these intangibles. When you work at like a larger studio, you start to like, things that you don't realize that you learn, like just simply being able to communicate like through email and keep meetings like down in time and all these things that I didn't realize I had learned until I started learning, and I love them to death. But like, you know, kids fresh out of college that would come and work with us, it was just amazing, some of the things that you take for granted in a workplace. But I think the number one thing that I took away was art direction. Like I feel like the university system kind of pushes you to be an engineer or an artist or one of these other tracks, and being an engineer artist is very difficult, right? And I understand.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do was I went in and did computer science, and then unable to connect, reconnecting, now hosting. Okay, sorry. So I did computer science, and I geared things toward an artistic goal.
Yeah.
But even as such, even gearing all my projects toward an artistic goal, like I wasn't being formally trained in art. And so even though when I kind of, Holly says, because Holly did do traditional art in school, and even though she said that I had like a natural eye for these things, I didn't know the way to express that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't very cognizant of it. I was the classic programmer where I was like, I'll just put a gray box and then I'll fill it in or whatever, right? And then because I was constantly art directed by incredibly talented people, like I would make a flag move and I would work on it and I would work on it, and then all of a sudden they would come over and they would be like, that looks like it's moving underwater. And I'd look at it, and as soon as they said it, I'd be like, oh my God, that's exactly what it looks like. But and that's not fair, because you're tunnel vision, you're iterating on frames, and then they just come along unbiased. But at the same point in time, they were incredibly talented, and they showed me like how to compose a scene and how to make things not look like they're popping, and how to, you know, all of these things that involve an art direction. And I think without that, I would have been incredibly intimidated to art direct my wife, who's incredibly talented, and my buddy Travis, who was a concept artist at DreamWorks, who are both, you know, way better at me at this stuff, which was funny for me to art direct them. But I don't think I would have been able to even come close to it if I hadn't been art directed for 10 years myself.
Yeah.
So,
like, I guess like I have a similar thing with working with our artist Woodley. Like we work pretty close together when we're, you know, working on the game. Like he still does all the art and everything, but you know, we work closely, and I've gotten a better eye for things. So like when I first ran into Randy and Ian, the guys who made Scapegoat 2, they had like a alpha build or a beta build or something at Casual Connect, and I played it, and I was like, hey, so these things with your art, like I think they're conflicting, and you know, maybe you should look into that. And I talked to them for like an hour or something at this convention. That's how I became friends with them, which was good. That's how I met you. But like, you know, I'm a programmer, and I was able to talk to Randy, who's a really talented artist, about like some decisions that he made, and I was like questioning him on them. And you know, in the end, he like took my advice and changed, you know, how the particles looked and how the lighting worked. And you know, be able to like, even though I'm a programmer, have some impact on artists, which is good. Like it's a good skill to have. And we see like a lot of students coming out of university and studies and stuff that there's just these telltales that you're just like, this is exactly where your animation is going wrong, and that's why it doesn't look like a good animation. But people just don't have that experience yet. Right. Yeah, and it's subtle things, and then you feel good, like, because I did have some guys that were right out of college, and I remember with the animation, like because we had those interstitials, and I would be able to direct them in that, and it was really, it felt good that like I was imparting some knowledge onto things. Like there were subtle things, like I remember
there was a camera tilt that we had on a shot to make it look a little bit more dynamic, and then it was when the guy dies and he falls down. Spoiler. And then you see his heart teleport in and fall.
Yeah.
But the heart was going screen down. So like, or no, sorry, it was going. So even though the camera was tilted, it was still going down and wide. And I'm like, no, the camera is tilted, so it has to go this way.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because I would see it and something would be visually wrong, but it's
Yeah.
not something that would be easy. I don't think anybody would like be writing on my forums or anything like that, but you could just tell something was off in it.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to impart that knowledge and stuff like that. And so then now, like whenever he tilts the camera, he remembers to do that.
Yeah.
Which is usually a 2D animation thing, because in 3D the scene is still in 3D, and if you're using gravity and stuff like that, it's still in Y or whatever. But yeah.
So what made you choose Unity for Duskers? That's a good question.
That is a good question. So we were using XNA for a virus named Tom. And then it was clear that Microsoft wasn't going to keep supporting XNA, which I was really bummed about because I liked XNA and it was free. And so we were starting to look into solutions, and my gut told me at first that we should just do C++ because we were in the middle of the Vita port, and it turned out that we were like rewriting it in C++ anyway, and it wasn't like one of those things where we weren't programmers or something like that, and so we were trying to look for an easier solution. It was like C++ is fine, object-oriented programming, blah blah blah. And then I was asking around a lot of people, and and a lot of developers that had gone the write my own thing way, like Brian Provinciano, and even Alex. Well, actually, Alex and David would still say to do it, but a lot of people were like, you know what, I put so much time and effort into this engine, Matt Goggenbach and stuff like that, and a lot of the code that I wrote was specific to the game, and I don't know if I would even end up reusing this.
Yeah.
And it was a ton of work, and it was just painful. And so around that time, all of a sudden, like, Unity was becoming a big thing, and I was kind of very begrudging because it's like a black box solution, and I was just like, we can't tear into the guts of it. And then I was sitting there, and I was like, you know what? How often do I do that? Like, at the end of the day, when I make games, I was like, I'm trying to make really interesting gameplay, really interesting games, and how often is it that, like, I need to go down and you can even with Unity. You can pay for, can't you pay for the source code or something like that? Anyway, the point is that I was like, you know what, how often do I really need to do that? And am I just kidding myself? So then I started playing around with Unity, and it's like crack, right? Like you do a game jam, right? And in like a day or two, all of a sudden you've turned out like a game that completely works, and you're just like, oh my God, that was amazing. To be able to have an editor where I take this character and just start them here, and then I don't like where they started, so I just move them.
Yeah.
And I hit play.
It's like,
and
to
then,
make that
right.
customizable takes a lot of code.
And it was just like, that is amazing. And for the cost, like the savings, because at first you're looking at the cost and you're just like, oh, this is way too expensive, right?
Guys, packs.
Oh.
Just teams getting together.
Yeah.
We got some
back,
tools.
hopefully it'll just magically be done. Yeah,
I got some tools, so we'll help
We'll
out.
see you at PAX on Saturday, and he will be there on
Are you guys
Thursday.
both coming?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'll be there. I'm leaving tomorrow, so yeah.
Sweet. Are you guys gonna both be there Sunday?
That is Greg Rice of Double Fine, people.
Oh shit, are you guys on the street? Sorry.
Don't worry.
Cool. Sunday, come to work, right?
Yes.
Okay, bye.
All right. The hell are we talking about? Oh, so Unity. So, so basically, then I worried because I was like, can I take this to completion?
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to be able to rapidly prototype something in an engine, and it's another thing to completely go to the end with it. And I started looking at games like there were a bunch of games that I was looking at on Steam that were made with Unity, and that gave me kind of the confidence that we could do that. And then Lexi and I joke around all the time that we're both making procedurally generated games in Unity, which doesn't really, like, there's a huge benefit to having this editor, and if you were making like this, level-based platformer or something like that, you could just be like, scene-based game, then that would work, and so our scenes are empty until you hit play. However, with debugging, It's pretty awesome
Yeah,
because I
it's
can
nice
sit
to have all
there,
those values
I can be
exposed.
playing the game and then something goes wrong and I can, I could pause it and go in there and select the thing and see what's actually going on. This is a really good way of visualizing it.
Yeah, like if you're making Unity's really good towards certain types of games. Like I made a little forklift game in like 2 days or something. That's like physics based.
That was fun. You should post that somewhere.
Yeah, you should. I need to like fix it up and add some more content. But like the fact that I can make a 3D game in 2 days that's like functional, it's a 4-player game,
Right.
is like pretty impressive. But then it's like, so if you're making a physics game that doesn't need really good physics, Unity got you back there. But if you're trying to get really precise collision detection out of just collisions, then you run into all these limitations with Unity, and it's just all those limitations that really suck. Like the pathfinding in Unity, like you bake it in the editor, so if you generate your content at runtime, like make your levels at runtime, you can't bake the pathfinding, so you can't even use Unity's pathfinding solution. So it's like they have all this stuff that's like, look, we handle pathfinding, we handle baked lighting, really nice features, we handle asset loading. Look how good it is to make a game, but it's only if it fits the kind of blueprint that Unity was. It's like, to be fair, 90% of games are going to utilize all that stuff.
Right.
It just turns out the games that we're making are in
that was really funny because I
Yeah.
had previously made a game, though I still placed all of those, like it wasn't like I had scenes and stuff like that. But yeah, it was funny because like if I was making, for example, when I was making The Last Shadow, which when we were making a single player mode where you go from room to room and stuff like that, I was able to just be like, let me just grab a bunch of rectangles and construct a scene real quick and go. And all of a sudden I had a single player mode, so it was like perfect for that.
Yeah.
Chess the Gathering, well, we construct the board and stuff like that, but still,
Yeah, the board's pretty
it's more, it works really well for those, and it still works really well for Duskers and stuff like that. But it's just funny
Yeah.
that having this awesome editor and then not really having
Yeah.
scenes.
Yeah. If you're planning to make a game, try and like think about what you need out of your engine and then pick an engine. Like with Spire, in the end, Unity, like all we're using it for is a cross-platform rendering engine at this point. Like I don't use Unity's update loop because it's really slow now. So it's like the fact that I can't use their update loop just blows me away. That's like the core thing an engine does is have an update loop, and
Right.
it's really slow. So it's gotten to the point where it's just like a C# scripting language with a cross-platform rendering engine is, like we have to handle all the asset loading ourselves now because everything's procedural and Unity doesn't do a good job. We have to handle all the pathfinding ourselves. Like I'm looking forward to Unity 5 because hopefully we can use some of their baked lighting stuff, but all the talks that I've listened to don't look promising, unfortunately. So I don't know, we'll see how it goes. Because they say, look how dynamic all this lighting is, but then they're like, but you have to, they need some data baked in. It's like, can we bake that at runtime?
Yeah.
Don't think so.
I have to admit though, it was pretty awesome when I was making my prototypes and we were at this like indie cabin. We were in Tahoe and we were just all like cranking on games, and a bunch of them had Macs and they were just like, oh, well, can I play it on a Mac? And I was like, I don't know. And then I this is oversimplifying it because it was a super simple prototype, but I was just like, and I looked and it was like build 2 and it was like Windows, and I dragged it Mac and then I hit go, and then I was like, what's this .app thing or whatever, like here, take this, does it work? And then they just started running it. And then Brad was just like, oh yeah, why don't you make it on a web page so that I can just go to the URL? And I'm just like, huh? And then I just did that and it was just like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like that stuff is really nice. And that I think is the power Unity has, is just easily being cross-platform. Like with Dustforce, we coded our own engine because originally we used GameMaker, and at the time GameMaker was really, really slow at rendering more than a handful of things to the screen. So we had to make our own rendering engine and own game engine, and it proved to be really difficult to port it because we had a really complex renderer. So porting it from DirectX and then OpenGL so we could get it working on a Mac, and then just fixing all those weird little bugs, and then eventually porting it to Linux. So it took our engine programmer like 3 months to port to Mac because he doesn't use a Mac and he doesn't have any idea about like how to make a program for Mac. So he had to like research all that stuff, and like he would have this bug where it's like, oh, it's not rendering for some reason. How do I, debug all this stuff? And you got to learn this whole new tool set.
Yeah, like after we launched Tom, like to be in Humble Bundle or whatever, like it was like, and we wanted to go Mac Linux or whatever, but we had to. Luckily, at that point, like Monogame had come along, and like we hadn't, it all worked out. But at the same point in time, it's nice to be able to just. Yeah. We're gonna have problems when we do it. I know we will, but that's the nice aspect of it.
For sure. All right. So the last question is: tell me about a time you failed.
Time that I failed.
You can do a couple.
I really, cause I've done, cause I've done this interview with these questions before with people. I can think of the way that people answered them and steal them. I really like how Jill answered it last week, because she was saying how it's kind of hippy dippy, but it was how failing is part of the process. Yeah. So she failed every day, and that was really important. Which brings to mind, I did a lot of improv, comedy, and.
That's a good story. You may have already told this one. I just love that you used to do improv.
Yeah, so I love improv, and I feel that improv has all these very, again, hippy-dippy things about it, and one of the things is about failing. And whenever you'd screw up and you'd fail in theory, everyone would stop and you'd yell as loud as you could, I failed. And then everyone would be like, I failed. And it was this incredibly positive, I did it. I failed. And that meant that you were pushing yourself. Because in improv, a lot of times what you try to do is not pre-think. Live in that moment. That way you can accept all the input from everybody, and you're not dominating the story, and all these saying yes, and, all these really cool things. And so that was a really positive message about I failed. So I was always debating. I always feel that, inevitably when I crash and burn, and I have to go back to the real world, and I can't be an indie dev anymore, then I'm going to have this blog post at the top of it. It's going to be I failed. Yeah. And it'll be I did it, I went and became an indie dev, and I tried to do my stuff, and financially, I suppose at that point I failed, though I would view it as a success because I was able to make what I wanted and meet all these really cool people and stuff like that. But yeah, that's a really broad, weird answer to that. I guess that's not even saying the time that
I think, to be fair, improv failing at an improv skit is very different to spending 2 years and then your game not being financially viable for you to eat food.
Yes.
Those are two different fails.
Yeah.
Sure, you learned something in both, but one of them took you 2 years to learn that lesson.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a good... I think one of the places that I failed was when a virus named Tom came out. It made money, but not enough money for long. Yeah. And I think one of the things, actually, Andy Schatz mentioned to me on an email thread, he was start working on your next game, right? He's I know that you want to push a virus named Tom, and I know you want to keep doing that. He's but, don't do that for so long, get going on your next game. And I agree and disagree with that. I disagree because of the biz dev part, I kept going with the virus named Tom. And we were able to do this deal for Vita that we're finally going to finish. We were able to get in a Humble Bundle. We were able to get into the IGN Prime and stuff like that. And all of those things made us enough money to keep going, right? And without that, we would have not been where we are today. So, and that's why we didn't go on to the next game. However, another reason we didn't go on to the next game is because we don't have enough money for the next game. Yeah. And Holly, understandably, I had kind of hijacked our savings and our future a little bit here and been I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do this thing. And she was really reticent to be let's work on another game because she was how are we going to pay for that? Yeah. And I think as an indie, what you have to realize is that you just run. There's a giant cliff face and you just run toward it and have faith that someone somehow will have started building a bridge by the time you get to that first step off the cliff.
Yeah.
And
that has happened.
Yeah. And so what we did was I was just you know what? I'm just going to start making the next game. And I was like, look at Tom. Every 3 months we think we're going to be out of money and I find something. I figure out a way. Yeah. And if I ever don't do that, yeah, I'm done. Like, I go and get a job. But until I run out of money completely, I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And then, just recently, Duskers got funded, and we were literally out of money. And I think there's just some kind of cosmic thing about that. Like, you have to push yourself to that brink until something will happen or something like that, so that, like, maybe some people know. They're like, do I invest my money? Yeah, he's crazy. He'll finish it. You know what I mean? So that's a time. I think the failure there was in not recognizing that I can't expect to get the money and be like, okay, this is enough money to make a game. Now we make a game.
Yeah.
You just have to be making your game and hope that you find money or a way. You just kind of persevere.
So with the bridge analogy thing that you brought up with the, like, run up the cliff and hope someone builds a bridge. Like, for us, it was like our release went good. Like, we made as much money as we put in, right? So it was financially, after taxes and stuff, like, I think it was like a week or 2 weeks after release, it was a financial success.
Right.
But then, like, it's not, we didn't want to live that way again for another 2 years, like,
Right.
I was putting most of the burden on my girlfriend to pay all the bills, and our artist would live with his mom, and another one would, like, not eat any food, and it's like, you don't want to live that way. So we didn't really, like, we were going to set out again with the money that we had, but we were just like, fuck, like, I don't know if I have that in me. But then, like, Steam came along and was like, hey, do a sale, and we're like, okay, and we got a lot, we didn't get heaps of money, but we got like 70 grand from that sale, and that was really helpful. And then Humble Bundle came along and invited us to be in a Humble Bundle, and that 140K or whatever it is that you get for being in a big bundle, like, that's gave us enough money to be like, oh, we can actually, like, make 30 grand a year, like, that's nice. But the problem with this game is we've got a 4-year dev cycle, and originally it was going to be 2 years, was the estimate from the other guys I work with, but I was like, this is going to take us a really long time, guys. Like, I don't know about 2 years. It's like, oh, we'll get it done. But so it's kind of like, right now we don't have enough money to finish a project, but we're banking on that there will be something that comes our way, like, whether or not it's another Steam sale or a Humble, or you have to go with a publisher or do crowdfunding or something. It's like, as long as you're making something of quality and you have enough to show for it, there'll be something along the way that'll help.
Yeah, that's the hope. And it's scary because you're doing it and you don't know that, right? But but I think that's the only way.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know of many people that are like, oh, I want to make a game, and, like, let me pitch this really, really bare bones thing, and then bam, like, oh yeah, here's all the money. But yeah. So let me see what time. Okay, 2:55. So we have like a few more minutes, and then because the Drinkbox guys come on after this. Did anybody have any questions?
No. So what else could we talk about? How much time do we have?
We only have.
I've got 4 minutes.
We only have like 4 minutes. I don't want to take up too much of their time.
Yeah, that's true.
We have that. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh, we never did that one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Where do I see myself in 5 years? I don't know. Hopefully my wife won't have divorced me, and my daughter will still, like, call me dad and stuff like that. I think actually that's kind of a good question, because it makes you think. I think in this industry a lot of times, like, you just get so focused on things that you forget about, like, thinking about where you're going to be. But then because things are so tumultuous, it's impossible to say, right? So where I would like to be in 5 years is where I am right now. I have enough money to make a game, and I'm making a game. Yeah. And I'm not, like, a huge burden on my family. Actually, I would like to be making a little bit more money so that I'm not quite the burden that I am on my family. But that's pretty much all I could really ask, which is a good thing. So, I mean, I guess I'm in a pretty happy state right now. But I guess that's where I see myself, because it's like you visualize it and then you can do it, right?
Maybe.
So Lexi is doing the interviewing.
Yeah.
So, did you say who you were?
Yeah, I'm Lexi. I worked on Dustforce, and I'm working on a game called Spire. It's a first-person adventure FPS that's procedurally generated. That is going to come out hopefully in about 2 years from now. But yeah, it's getting there. One way to go though.
Right.
Most of the tech is nearly done. It's got co-op, so you can play with your friends over the internet because people like that. But no, it's going to be kind of hopefully a big part of the game. At least I want it to be a big part of the game. But you can also play single player if you don't have any friends,
Right.
or you want to tackle the campaign.
Spire alone.
Yeah. But,
And yeah, after Duskers is Chess the Gathering next. So Chess the Gathering is kind of like this side thing that I started. I pitched The Last Shadow and Chess the Gathering as well, and Duskers was the one that seemed to resonate the most with the people that were like, we can give you the money. And so that's good because I needed the money. But Chess the Gathering, we actually do have an update for it that we're hoping to push out pretty soon. And I don't know after Duskers, I would hope that I would either do The Last Shadow or Chess the Gathering because I could hit the ground running. And Chess the Gathering has a lot of people that have it just because we were letting people download it if they were on our mailing list. But I don't know how many of them are playing it actively. So we're going to try and add asynchronous in and see if that helps
yeah,
it.
that helps a lot in
Right.
these kind of games.
Right.
Thanks for buying 20 copies of Dust Force so I could buy one hamburger.
Yes, that
Which
was a good
is-
hamburger, right?
Yeah, it was. It was a $20 hamburger. But yeah, well, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yeah.
We'll probably go back to Tim interviewing people in this space next week.
Yeah.
So tune in at 2. Is it 2 o'clock? On
Yeah,
Wednesday?
2 o'clock. So we're going to do this as a regular thing. So 2 o'clock on Wednesdays, we're going to keep doing this. And sometimes I'm going to interview people, and then sometimes I'll maybe play Duskers or go over something about the process or whatever. We're going to kind of just wing it for now and figure it out. But thanks for tuning in. So next Wednesday at 2, we'll do the same thing. Same bat time, same bat channel.